Police knocked on the door over a minor complaint. Gary Siders Jr. was accused of indecent exposure in public. When they pushed the door open, nothing could have prepared them for what was waiting inside. 16 children. Almost none of them had existed on paper for nearly 20 years. No school records, no medical records. How does a system this large miss 16 children for that long? That morning, no one on the police team was looking for 16 children. They didn't even know the children existed. It was the morning of June 30th in Hamden, a small Ohio town of fewer than 200 people. Around 10 a.m., an investigative team from Benton County pulled up outside a rented house. No sign, nothing unusual, just another house, like hundreds of others scattered across rural Ohio. In their hands was a search warrant, but that warrant had nothing to do with children. It came from something else entirely. Gary Siders Jr. stood accused of indecent exposure in 4 separate incidents back in May. They knocked, presented the warrant, stepped inside. And in that moment, the door swung open. Everything they thought they knew about that morning collapsed. Nobody on that team was prepared for what waited on the other side. Benton County prosecutor William Archer later confirmed it in one short sentence. His team never expected to find a single child in that house. But they found 16. Not one, not a few, 16. Some truths are never found because no one goes looking for them. They only surface when a completely unrelated door happens to swing open in the wrong direction. It wasn't that a plan had been uncovered. It was that there had been no plan at all. Just a coincidence, arriving almost 20 years too late. And what they found behind that door would leave 4 adults in that house facing a combined 64 criminal charges. Father, mother, grandfather, grandmother. 4 generations standing before the judge on the same day. The moment the search ended, police arrested 4 members of the Siders family. Gary Siders Jr., 36, the father. Elizabeth Sider, 33, the mother. Gary Siders Sr., 73, the grandfather. Christina Siders, 66, the grandmother. Each was charged with 16 counts of child endangerment, 1 for every child found in that house. Combined, the 4 adults faced 64 felony charges. These weren't minor charges. Under Ohio law, each one is a second-degree felony, a level of severity just below murder and a handful of other, especially serious crimes. Each count carries a sentence of 2 to 8 years. But here's what set this case apart. Not 1 charge, 16. In theory, if every sentence were stacked to its maximum and served consecutively, each defendant could be looking at well over 100 years in prison. In practice, judges rarely stack every single sentence when all the victims are siblings from the same family. But if convicted, the sentences would likely be grouped together. Even so, in the gentlest possible outcome, this still means years of prison, possibly decades. On July 1st, all 4 appeared in court for the first time. None of them entered a guilty plea. Picture that courtroom, a small room in a county with fewer than 13,000 residents, a place that probably had never seen more than 1 or 2 reporters at a hearing before. Now, dozens of cameras crowded in all at once. But 4 numbers and 4 names don't tell the whole story. To understand how this went as far as it did, you have to go back much further. Back to 2008, where all of this actually began. In 2008, a 15-year-old girl entered a marriage. She had no way of knowing that decision would shape the next 20 years of her life. Her name was Elizabeth. The boy she married was Gary Siders Jr., 18 at the time. The wedding took place in a small county in West Virginia. Back then, state law allowed marriage at any age, as long as a parent gave consent. So nothing about this marriage was illegal under the law as it stood. 2 months after the wedding, their first child was born. From there, something began to repeat, year after year. By 2026, when the case broke, Elizabeth was 33. According to her attorney, the couple had 16 surviving children. Not 2, not 5, 16. Court records show 3 sets of twins born in different years, and in 2022, Elizabeth gave birth to conjoined twins. Both babies died the same day of natural causes. Through all of it, the family lived alongside the paternal grandparents, Gary Sr. and Christina. 4 adults, a growing number of children, and constant movement through several Ohio counties and at one point all the way to Wisconsin. What no one noticed was that every move pulled the family one step further out of sight. A decision made at 15, legal at the time, set off a chain of consequences that stretched across nearly an entire generation. But among the 4 adults standing in that courtroom today, one name makes the question far more complicated than any of the others. Was she a perpetrator? Or in some way was she also a victim? Even her own attorney won't answer that question. His name is Tom Stoley, court appointed to defend Elizabeth Siders. He confirmed publicly that his client is the biological mother of all 16 children in the case. But when reporters asked whether Elizabeth should be considered a victim, his answer was anything but certain. He said his office, as of now, still cannot make that determination. Many psychologists have linked her situation to a concept known as coercive control. It's a form of prolonged psychological manipulation, one that gradually strips a victim of the ability to think and decide for herself. It typically comes with isolation, cut off from family, friends, from any relationship outside the one controlling them. Over time, the victim comes to believe the outside world is dangerous, or simply not to be trusted. Married at 15, a child soon after, the constant relocation for nearly 20 years from one county to the next, several elements line up neatly with that theoretical model. So take a moment to picture it. A 15-year-old girl who never rented an apartment on her own, never held a job, never spent a single day apart from her 18-year-old husband. From that moment forward, every major decision in her life passed through someone else first. And yet, this is exactly what makes the story more complicated than it looks. Elizabeth's own attorney admits that what he's observed in his client doesn't fully match the typical psychological profile of a coercive control victim. He says that every time he visits her in jail since the day of her arrest, she has been utterly devastated. But devastation doesn't automatically mean innocence, because for 18 years, Elizabeth was also the one who carried each pregnancy, gave birth, and lived alongside her children every single day, closer to them than anyone else in that house. If she was a victim, who was controlling her? And if she wasn't, why did a 15-year-old girl begin this path with no one stepping in to stop it? This is exactly why this case haunts so many people. Not because it's simple, it's because it isn't. Not every story splits cleanly into villain and victim. Sometimes the blurred line is the hardest thing to face. While that question hangs unanswered, a separate unrelated discovery was about to quietly change the entire direction of the case. He never made it to that hearing. On July 7th, all 4 defendants were being transported to the Vinton County Courthouse to continue the legal proceedings. It was an ordinary morning, like every other morning since their arrest. But on the way there, Gary Siders Sr., the 73-year-old grandfather, suddenly collapsed. He fell. No specific details of that moment were ever released. All that's known is that he was rushed straight to a Blennis hospital in neighboring Athens County. Doctors there discovered something that, until that point, no one may have known. He was suffering from a serious medical condition, one requiring specialized treatment far beyond what any local hospital could provide. Prosecutor Archer then made an announcement that caught many people off guard. Siders Sr. would be released on his own recognizance. Now, don't mistake that for mercy. The real reason was far colder. Keeping him in county jail could have generated medical costs large enough to drain the budget of an entire poor county. He was fitted with a GPS monitor to track him during treatment. A 73-year-old man now lying in a hospital bed instead of behind bars. At the same time, his attorney filed a separate motion, a competency evaluation. The question was no longer simply guilty or not guilty. It was whether he was even capable of understanding the legal process happening to him. Even in a case shaking the entire country, the justice system still has to balance several things at once. Justice, age, illness, and the budget of a small county. Even so, it turns out the biggest question in this entire case wasn't sitting in that courtroom at all. It was buried in an old file, forgotten for 5 years. The system had already tried to uncover this. It failed by the narrowest of margins. It was the Columbus Dispatch that found that file, an old record seemingly forgotten long ago. In October 2021, Galley County's court received a complaint. 6 of the citer's children were marked absent for an entire school year. Not a few days. The entire year. The record states it plainly. The parents had failed to ensure their children attended school, as required by law. The school district tried to make contact. A court officer, summons in hand, went looking for the address on file. But they couldn't locate Elizabeth or Gary Jr. What no one knew at the time was that the family had already moved. Right as the system was closing in January of 2022, the case was formally closed. Not because it was resolved, the court record states this plainly. The family's current whereabouts could not be determined. Picture that moment, a court officer standing in front of an empty house, knocking on the door where no one lived there anymore. Just a few months too late. A few months. A few months is the entire distance between a truth that should have come out in 2022 and the reality. It didn't surface until 4 years later, in 2026. If that officer had knocked a little sooner, if the family had moved a little later, this story might have never needed to be told. This isn't a story about no one noticing. It's a story about someone noticing and arriving exactly a step too late. And while the children were slowly vanishing from every state record, 2 other people in that same house never once stopped appearing in the system. The grandparents kept receiving government assistance every single month, without interruption. The 16 grandchildren living under that same roof didn't exist on a single piece of paper. No school records. The oldest child in the house, now 18, reportedly never learned how to write their own name. No medical records were ever created for any of the 16. And in 20 years, not once did a child protective agency ever intervene in that family. That might sound hard to believe, but remember how these agencies typically catch a problem in the first place. They rely on reports from schools, from hospitals, from neighbors. No school, no hospital, a family constantly on the move. Almost no way left for the system to ever lay eyes on those children. Prosecutor Archer, however, revealed one more detail at a press conference. Of the 4 adults, the grandparents were the ones he could confirm, with certainty, had been receiving government benefits. He didn't specify what kind. Possibly Social Security, possibly food assistance. So what does that actually mean? It means the 2 oldest adults in that house were interacting regularly with the state's administrative system, filling out forms, signing their names, collecting a payment every month. Meanwhile, the 16 children living right beside them didn't exist in any system at all. The adults were seen, the children were not. That's the cruelest paradox at the heart of this case. A system built to protect the most vulnerable people could only recognize the ones who needed it the least. And if any of this feels familiar, like something that's happened somewhere before, you're not wrong. Nearly a decade ago, America watched an almost identical pattern play out. People called it a wake-up call. It turns out that alarm was never loud enough. In 2018, in the state of California, officials uncovered another family. The case became known nationwide by a single name, the Turpin family. That case closed years ago. Both parents pleaded guilty and served lengthy prison sentences. It's a case with a final verdict, no longer under investigation. What connects 2 cases nearly a decade apart isn't the specific details, it's the mechanism. A large family living in isolation, avoiding every point of contact with the outside world, schools, clinics, neighbors. If a family can eliminate those points of contact completely, in theory, they can stay invisible for years, no matter how large the family grows. After the Turpin case, several states reviewed their child welfare oversight rules. Many experts believe that gap had finally been closed. But nearly a decade later, an almost identical pattern resurfaced. This time, not in a crowded California suburb, but in a poor, sparsely populated county deep in rural Ohio. That raises a question with no easy answer. Were the reforms that followed Turpin ever strong enough? Or is the core flaw still sitting there, simply waiting for the next family to stumble onto it? The darkest part of this story may not be a single person at all. It may be an institutional blind spot, one that can be exploited again and again until someone actually fixes it at the root. And right now, as this video is being made, there's one detail even the prosecutor refuses to confirm. No one will say why that search warrant was really issued. And now, by order of a judge, no one will be allowed to say anything at all. Officially, the June 30th search warrant was tied to Gary Sider Jr.'s indecent exposure charges. But when reporters asked directly whether that was truly the only reason behind the search, both State Attorney General Andy Wilson and Prosecutor Archer declined to confirm it. That silence on its own said something. The defense team went even further. They stated publicly that they don't believe that was the real reason either. We know exactly what police found behind that door. What we still don't know with any certainty is what actually brought them there in the first place. And then a new legal development emerged, one that may mean that questions never gets answered publicly. Gary Sider Jr.'s attorney filed a motion requesting a gag order. He argued that a steady stream of public statements from officials was jeopardizing his client's right to a fair trial. The judge agreed. The order was signed. It bars police, the attorney general, and the prosecutor from making any further public statements about the case or the evidence being gathered. Picture the press room right now, completely empty. A place that once packed in dozens of reporters every week now holds nothing but empty chairs and one more closed door. This time, it's the justice system's own door. Justice sometimes demands silence, even when the public's hunger for answers has never been greater. But that silence raises another question of its own, one just as cold. What happens next to 4 adults, to 16 children just beginning a life they've never known before? The grand jury hasn't met yet. There's no verdict. But there is one question that doesn't need a courtroom to answer it. As of now, all 4 adults in the Siders family maintain their not guilty pleas. The case is headed to a Vinton County grand jury to determine whether there's enough evidence for formal charges. Gary Sider Sr. is still awaiting the results of his competency evaluation while continuing medical treatment. Elizabeth Siders remains suspended between 2 words, victim and perpetrator, a question even her own attorney can't yet answer. As for the 16 children, all of them are safe now. All are in Ohio's foster care system. The state has approved $1 million in emergency funding specifically to support them. Not every question in this case will ever be answered, but some of them may stay buried behind that gag order that was just signed. Even so, one thing is almost certain. Somewhere out there, right now, another door just like this one may still be closed. A different address, a different town, another family invisible to the entire system. Not because no one cares, but because sometimes all it takes is moving at the right time, to the right place for a family to vanish from the sight of an entire society. So maybe the real question isn't how did this happen? Maybe it's this. Right now, how many other doors are still closed that no one even knows about?